start shortly. Hi there, everyone. We'll be starting in a minute's time. We're just giving a bit more time for any late attendees, so please do bear with us. Right, I think we'll make a start. So, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our webinar on maximizing S4HANA performance. Next slide, please. I'll start with quick introductions. My name is Faz Ahmed, and I'm a business development manager at Prolifics Testing. I've been with Prolifics for 7 years now, but I've been in the testing services sector for over 20 years. As part of my role, I'm the go-to-market owner for SAP S4HANA, which involves looking at how we can deliver innovation and improvements to our SAP customers. I'm joined today by Neil Williams, who's a Neoload subject matter expert from our partner Prolifics. Hi, Neil. And before we begin, just a bit of general housekeeping. We've muted this webinar, but please feel free to enter any questions into the chat box, and we'll try and answer them as we go along, but there's also time set aside at the end. Next slide, please. So for this afternoon, in terms of agenda, I'm going to start with an introduction to Prolifics. I'll walk you through our SAP experience and talk through a case study with Intuitive Surgical and how we implemented code-free performance testing for their S4HANA migration. I'll hand over to Neil, who'll talk you through Tricentis Neoload's performance test tool, and then show you just how easy it is to create a code-free S4HANA performance script. Finally, as I mentioned, there'll be some time set aside at the end for questions, but please do type away as we go through the webinar. Next slide, please. So for those of you who haven't come across us, Prolifics is a global digital transformation specialist. We help organizations on their journey to the cloud. And once there, we can help them integrate their cloud platforms with downstream systems through middleware platforms and APIs. We also have a dedicated data and analytics practice, which includes data scientists to help our clients leverage the latest in AI-enabled analytics. And finally, we have our quality engineering practice, which is what I'm part of. And if you were to ask me what makes Prolifics different to other digital transformation companies, I'd have to say innovation. And not for its own sake, but to help our clients to deliver faster, smarter, and at less cost. Next slide, please. At Prolifics, we consider ourselves to be SAP experts. We've got over 23 years of experience in new implementations, in support pack and upgrade testing for SAP. And this is delivered through our 300 plus SAP test engineers with functional technical knowledge and our 50 plus S4HANA technical resources. This slide shows some of our SAP testing clients, which are globally based, but a lot within the UK and the US regions. Now, we've undertaken a mixture of manual testing, test automation, and performance testing for projects across SAP ECC, Fiori, and S4HANA. And as McKesson's test outsource partner, we were lucky enough to be part of one of the first S4HANA migrations globally, and we've undertaken a number of these since then. And just worth noting, our experience goes across other integrated applications too, such as Salesforce, Workday, ServiceNow, and Tableau. Next slide, please. Now, I'm going to talk you through one of our recent projects, Intuitive Surgical. We're embarking on an S4HANA migration. And one of the selling points of moving to the HANA database was to improve system performance, particularly around some data-intensive actions, which would lead to hanging screens on their existing ECC platform. We needed a way to make sure system performance was improved in these scenarios. So the Prolifics team undertook performance baselines on the existing ECC platform and then reused the same scripts with some minor modifications on the target S4HANA platform. We were able to work with the team at Intuitive Surgical to help fine-tune the performance until it met business requirements. Now, ensuring your S4HANA platform is available and performant is key to end-user experience. We often focus on functional and data side of S4HANA migrations and end up with non-performant platforms with lots of support calls going into the IT help desk and complaining about their applications aren't working. As Intuitive Surgical had already chosen Tricentis Tosca for their S4HANA test automation, it was easy for them to decide on Neoload for performance testing. Now, for those of you who haven't come across Neoload before, it makes performance testing easy with its ability to do code-free scripting. It also gives the ability to have real-time analytics, so teams can see performance metrics as tests are run. It gives the ability to compare results over different executions and releases, and also the ability to use existing functional test automation scripts to drive performance tests. And that can be a real time saver when it comes to testing across a large number of different scenarios and tests. Now I'm going to hand over to Neil, who will take you through Tricentis Neoload and how you can leverage it on your S4HANA migration. Over to you, Neil.
Okay, perfect. If you go next slide. Now, as mentioned, obviously we're talking about performance testing, but it's worth clarifying what we actually mean by performance testing. Now, in terms of Neoload, Neoload is a load generation tool. The whole purpose of the Neoload is to generate a large volume of users all hitting the backend system and verifying it can cope with the demands being placed on it. Now, obviously, that is stressing the backend, that's stressing the server, but we want to make sure that all of these individual people, all of these individual users gets a decent level of responsiveness. So making sure the system performs and is nice and quick while there's 500 people using it at the same time. If you can go next slide. Now, when you're testing SAP, typically you're doing obviously a new release, a new upgrade, a new transport's been delivered, but you also might be doing that migration from an ECC platform to S4HANA. And what you want to do is you want to future-proof your migration. So not only do you want to verify your system can support the current demands, but it also has the ability to grow and stretch and handle, potentially what's coming in the future. Now, you may release to 300 users, we're kind of July time, but in September, maybe you onboard a few more. Maybe you go to 500 users, 600 users. Maybe December, January next year, you up to 1,000. So when you're doing this performance testing, you want to verify that it works for today's numbers, but you also want to find out what your limitations are. If you go next slide. Now, obviously part of this is kind of future-proofing it. How far can I push the boundaries before potentially it comes tumbling down? So you also want to be doing this kind of testing before it goes live, because you don't want this happening in front of your customers. So if we go next slide. Now, I always put in this slide, I've seen this slide many times over many years, but we all know the quicker you find the defect, the cheaper, the easier it is to fix. This is especially true when it comes to performance testing, because your entire application is built on that foundation, it's built on that architecture. And the whole idea really is that you might have the most beautiful application in the world, but if it hasn't been performance tested and the foundation is a bit unstable, then you're pushing all of the risk towards the end. So, testing SAP, making sure it all works, making sure it all functions, absolutely great, but you also want to make sure it scales. There's no point rolling it out to 300 users if when the 42nd user logs in, it comes tumbling down. And if you click on next, I've included a little bit of animation just to emphasize the point. You might have layers and layers and layers of perfect functionality. It looks great, it's, impressive, it's got lots and lots of rich functionality. Next slide. But if the foundation isn't stable, if it's not solid, if the stand is weak, for example, it can all come tumbling down. So performance testing is especially key. You don't want to push it to the end. You don't want to have it as an afterthought. You want to bake in performance testing from day one. Make sure it works, make sure it scales. Add a bit more functionality, make sure that works, make sure it scales. And if we go next slide. Now, obviously, when you're testing SAP, whether you are testing kind of an on-prem deployment or you're moving towards the cloud, you want to test that system in a realistic manner. You've got users interacting with the system in different ways. They could be coming in via the SAP GUI, and there still may be a few GUI users out there, but you've also got web users interacting with the system. There's APIs calls going on, because obviously it's not just your system. Your system is talking to another system, which is talking to another system. So when you're testing your application, obviously being SAP, you want to make sure that all of those different endpoints are being targeted. I don't want to say you attack it from all sides, but you want to create a realistic environment to verify that the system can cope. Whether it is web users, GUI users, whether there's ETLs happening on the back end, pushing information to analytics cloud, for example, you want to make sure all of that is in place. And Nearload supports all of those technologies, injecting traffic, injecting load from all those different directions. If you go next slide. And then obviously this is where Nearload comes into it. Now I've included some screenshots and we're going to see this in the demonstration anyway. But the key thing from a Nearload point of view is Nearload itself is codeless. There is no scripting language. So I don't have to be a developer. I don't need to know how to code. I don't care about compilation failures or syntax issues. Spelling mistakes don't affect me because there is no code to actually get wrong. So Nearload has this visual test editor that you can see in the screenshots. It's basically, I'd like to describe it as like a preview or a flowchart. You follow the direction through the application. If you get to a decision point, an if statement, do I go left, do I go right? So the whole idea really is that non-technical users can pick up Nearload and be productive as quickly as possible. When you do want to introduce kind of logic, loops, if statements, it's all just kind of drag and drop. It's all just kind of drag and drop. Now, we do have what we call a correlation capability. Now, putting in kind of simplistic terms, Nearload has capabilities built into it to help you take a recorded test and turn it into a working playing test. And what I basically mean by that is Nearload will scan your recording. It will scan the test you've just created, and it will look for all of the things that it can fix. Now, whether it does it on the fly, seeing traffic going up and down and kind of gluing it together for you, or whether it uses what we call a framework, a knowledge base, and scans your test and says, I can fix that, I can fix that, and also I can fix that. But all of this combined is to save you time. We're not taking anything away from performance testing, but we're trying to make the performance testers' life that much easier. If we make their lives easier, they can do more testing. If they do more testing, you have more confidence when you go live. Now, in terms of kind of other stuff on here, looking at the kind of headlines, yes, we are codeless. Yes, we've got correlation capabilities. That basically means you have a working test. What you then need to consider is your test data. Again, Nearload has capabilities to access different data sources, whether that's file-based CSV files, or that's database queries. The whole idea is you need test data in your test because it's all about realism. different usernames, different passwords, different search terms, different materials and quantities, all of that kind of stuff you need to parameterize. And then from a validation point of view, Nearload is not a functional test tool, but you want to do checkpoints along the way. And what I basically mean by that is 500 users log into SAP. Hopefully, fingers crossed, I see 500 welcome back type messages. If I create 500 sales orders, I should get 500 sales order numbers. So effectively, when there's 500 users hammering at the front door, you want to make sure the system stayed up. It's still responsive, it's still quick, and it's still fulfilling the needs of the users. Now, I have included some screenshots in here, but we'll touch on this in the demonstration. But you can see that it is that tree view approach. It's a hierarchy, it's a flow chart. It's very easy to understand what Nearload is doing. Now, we also have a capability called test as code, but that's a marketing name. Effectively, it's codeless still. It's a test definition language aimed at your developer or your DevOps engineer who may want to test earlier in the life cycle. You build an API, you test it, make sure it works, you test it, make sure it scales. So we're aimed at different types of individuals, but again, it's all designed to help you become productive. If we go next slide. Now, it's not just us obviously saying this. We have lots of kind of customer testimonials, but Nearload is designed to be intuitive. It's designed to be easy to use. You can see here on this slide from the analysts that when it comes to test creation time, it's 60% quicker to create tests when compared to other tools. Be they open source, be they competitive, Nearload is designed to help you become productive that much quicker. And we're seeing this in the demonstration anyway, but you don't create anything in Nearload as such. You either record the interactions, so Nearload is recording what you do against the system under test, or you can import content. If I was testing an API, I'll import the Swagger file, for example. If I'm testing a web service, I'll import the WSDL. And then when it comes to things like test maintenance, we have a capability called user path update. Now, in simplistic terms, what that basically means is, well, I've already got the recording, I've created the test, I've put in loops, I've put in if statements, I've done correlations, I've invested time and effort in this test. And then SAP changes. You get a new release or a new deployment. What Nearload does is Nearload could say, well, you've got version 1 already, let's record a version 2, and then let's compare them. And the whole idea is that you're not starting again. Nearload will look at that version 2 and just bring across the new capabilities, the new steps. So you don't lose any of the existing investment. And we have found, obviously, on feedback from customers, that they have found 90% improvements in maintenance because they're not having to start from day one again. They are just cherry picking the additions, if you like. So if we go next slide. Now, I'm hoping, and obviously that all made sense, but if there are any questions, now is a good time before we jump into the demo.
We've got a few questions, Neil. Right, first one is, how can you use functional test scripts for performance testing?
So in terms of the Nearload toolset, obviously Nearload is focused on performance testing, but Tricentis has a suite of tools. We have tools for test management, impact analysis, but obviously we have functional test tools as well. And the whole idea really is, if the functional test team have invested time, they've built scripts, they've automated the functional side of the test case, then there's no reason that we as a performance test team can't reuse that. Why would I re-record it again if the functional team's already done the work? Why not just kind of pick up their work and drop it into the performance testing world? I'll also show you that in the demonstration as well.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that. A couple around licensing. So first one is real browser licenses. Are they separate or are they included in the Nearload license?
So real browser is effectively web testing, but real browser is like a functional test. Instead of recording the traffic leaving the browser, going up and down the network, real browser is recording what you do. If you check a checkbox, if you type into an edit box, real browser records that. And it's part of our web package, if you like. And because it's part of our web package, it's included in every single edition. So it's like at the base level, every license, every edition has real browser.
Okay, thank you for that. And the final one, more generic, how does Neoload licensing work?
So Nearload has a let's take a step back. Nearload is licensed based on a performance load you want to generate. So it's licensed by virtual users. So you could install Nearload on 227 machines, use it unlicensed, absolutely perfect. When you come to want to run a load test, that's when Nearload will say, do you have a license, yes or no? It will look at the license server and check out the license. So if you wanted to do a 250 user load test, Nearload would look at the license server, take the license, run the test, and then when it's done, return the license back again. So obviously I could have the license now at, what was it, 10 to 3? You could have it at 5 o'clock. Someone else could have it at 9 o'clock, and so on. You take turns on the license. If you had multiple teams of people all needing to kind of split the license out, I want to run a test at 3 o'clock, and so do you. You could also then slice the license in two, or slice it in 4 or 8 or 10. So you can kind of divvy up the license if you wanted to as well.
Brilliant. I think that's it for now.
Okay, perfect. If we switch to my screen now, and I'll show you what Nearload looks like in the flesh. Perfect. So what I'll do first is I'll kind of just walk you through Nearload in terms of what's in the box. And then what I'm going to do is give you like an SAP flavor demonstration. So from a Nearload point of view, we have the Nearload GUI. The Nearload GUI is installed on your laptop or your desktop. It's where you build, design, create, record, develop your test. But as I've mentioned already, when it comes to creating the test, there is no coding language. So I will either record it. Now, whether I'm recording web, SAP GUI, your browser, Nearload is going to record what I do on the system. Alternatively, what you can do is you can import. So I could be importing from Postman, I could be importing from Swagger and WSDL files and so on. So I can bring that information into Nearload. Once I've got the test, obviously I need to get it working, get it running, and I'll show you that in a second. But I can run it from the Nearload GUI. So I can design my load test, how many users, what size, where it's running from. And I can do all of my reporting from here as well. So me as a tester, everything I need is on my laptop. But what about kind of the rest of the team? So there is a component called Nearload Web. Nearload Web is all about collaboration. But Nearload Web is also your license server. So when I said I'm going to grab the license in 10 minutes and fans can have it later, this is where we would access that license from. But like I said, it's all about collaboration. So all of my results, I can publish to a web portal. Now you can see here, I ran a test earlier against SAP, and I've got some results in here. That means me, the DBA, the developer, the project lead, we could all collaborate, do the analysis together. Nearload Web also has playback capabilities. So I can run my test from here if I wanted to, which is absolutely fine. But obviously, if I'm going to run it from the web, I need some connected hardware because I can access the web browser on my telephone, for example, but I'm not going to run it on my telephone. So the whole idea with Nearload Web is you would have some connected resources. Now, that could be my son's laptop, my wife's desktop, so physical boxes, virtual machines. But it could also be Kubernetes if you're using dynamic infrastructure in a private cloud, or it could be the Nearload cloud platform. So whether it's our cloud, whether it's your cloud, whether it's some machines in a training room somewhere, you've got this connected hardware you can run a test on. So the Nearload GUI is where I build, design it, execute, and report. I can do reporting and execution from here as well, and it's also my license server. And then you've got that cloud platform we can all utilize. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through a very simple kind of set of recordings. Now, obviously, this is a webinar. It's not going to be a real detailed demonstration, but it's going to kind of show you kind of the art of the possible. So I'm going to go back to my design view. And I mentioned it already, I can record different types of test. Now, web testing is where I record the traffic leaving a web browser. So obviously I would be driving Fury, Analytics Cloud, SuccessFactors and so on, but I'm driving that web browser and Nearload is capturing the conversation going down the network. All of those HTTP requests and responses going backwards and forwards. And so we can record at that level. But as I mentioned already, we could record real browser, whereby we're not pretending to be a browser anymore. We're recording what you do. If you click into an edit box and type in a username, we will click into the edit box and type in a username. So when it comes to test creation, Nearload can record those use cases. So I'm going to walk you through a couple of examples. So I'm going to do a web recording first, and I'm going to call this webinar web. And I'm going to use Chrome as my client. Now, like I said, Nearload is recording the traffic leaving the browser. We don't really care what the client is. Could be Chrome, could be Edge, could be Safari, could be my telephone, could be my tablet, could be my TV. We don't care. So I'm going to record the conversation, and I'm going to record what is leaving Chrome. And if I click OK, Chrome's not running. I confirm it's not running. And what I've done is I've inserted Nearload in the middle of the conversation. So Chrome talks to Nearload, Nearload talks to SAP, SAP responds to Nearload, Nearload displays it in the browser. So I'm going to do a quick recording, and I've got this little floating toolbar, because Nearload is going to record everything I do, everything I type, and every request that goes up and down the network. But users don't care. Putting it bluntly, no one really cares. They don't care that you've just downloaded a font or a bitmap. They don't care that you've just downloaded the SAP logo, for example. They're thinking in terms of business process. What am I currently up to? Am I logging on? Am I doing a search? Am I retrieving an order? So we're going to do the same. So a transaction here in this floating toolbar is just a timer, but it's a timer around a group of activities. So in here, I'm going to say go to the SAP homepage, and I will click here, my bookmark, my shortcut, my hyperlink, and I go to the SAP homepage. And then once I'm at the SAP homepage, I want to log in. I want to send my credentials to SAP. So log in and send details. And then I log into SAP. Now, Nearload is recording all of the traffic leaving Chrome going up and down the network, so all of the requests and the responses. And if I was to do a VA01, if I was to amend a quote, all of those interactions will get recorded. Now, for the purpose of the demo, I'm not going to take you through an entire sales process in SAP. I'm going to cheat a little bit and just say I want to exit. And then I can come here and I can sign out. Am I sure? Yes, I am. And I've just recorded a test. It's a very small test, obviously, but if I shut down Chrome, because Nearload started Chrome, when Chrome disappears, we stop recording. We're going to clip those last few kind of conversations, and then you can decide what to keep. Now, we recorded all of the traffic that left my computer, but the only traffic I want to keep, if I can see it, is my SAP traffic. From my web browser talking to SAP, all of this other stuff I can ignore. And the reason I can ignore it is because I was using Chrome and Chrome was talking to Google. So I know that's not part of my journey. Now, we do record everything because we let you decide what's important and what isn't. But in this example, it's just me to SAP, back to me. And then this is those correlation capabilities we talked about. Nearload will look for information coming from the server that you send back again, and it will offer to kind of glue them together for you. But it also has this framework capability, which is like an inbuilt knowledge base. It's basically looking at your recording and saying, I recognize that keyword, and I recognize that word, I recognize it as SAP, and because I know it's SAP, I know you need to fix this, this, and this. So using kind of the guesswork on the fly, and also that inbuilt knowledge, we can take a recorded test and turn it into a working playing test. Now, I'm not going to do this just because obviously we're on a webinar, we don't have much time. I'm going to kind of show you, here's one prepared earlier. But before we do that, this is what we recorded. We go to the homepage, we logged in, and then we logged off. So nice and simple. But if I was to do a little flag here I know that I logged into SAP using a user called nearload01 and get rid of the batch case. Oh no, my mistake, nearload02. You can see here, we've got a blue tick. Now this is where we sent the username to the server. If I close that down and expand on that, follow the blue ticks, you can see that's where I logged in with my username and my password. So any conversation sent to the server and any response that comes back, Nearload has recorded for me. Now, the reason I'm not going to focus on this test is I've got one that we prepared earlier. But the one that we prepared earlier is inside our functional test tool. As I mentioned, Nearload can record me doing the use case, but if the functional team have already done it and they happen to be using a supported product, why not just reuse their content? So we're in Tricentis Tosca, which is our functional test tool. If I come back here, you will see I've got a test case. It's create a sales order in Fury. I log in, I create a sales order, I fill in the forms, I save it, and I log off again. And if I was to expand on some of this, which one is it going to be in? So you can see here, this is the functional tool filling in the form of the order. Now, if the functional team have already done it, why don't I just reuse their work? So I'm going to take this sales order and I'm going to execute it. So create a sales order, we drag that, drop it into here, whoops, and I'm going to create a new execution list. An execution list is just like a little batch job. You know, you chain your test cases together, you run them in one go. So there's my execution list, number one. Let's just rename that. Send to Nearload. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to run that test. And you can see there's this transfer option. Now, whether it's an SAP GUI test case, whether it's SAP Web, whether it's any web, whether it's APIs, I can take that test case from the functional world and simply transfer it into the performance testing world, if you like. So I'm going to transfer that. Now, the only difference here is instead of me driving the screen and Nearload recording traffic leaving the browser, Tosca itself is driving the screen. You know, my hands are here, I'm not doing anything. But Tosca is driving the front end, Nearload is listening to the conversation leaving the browser. So we're going to do a VA01. It also means that me as a performance tester, I don't have to learn the use case. I don't have to follow a script and learn what data goes in what field. So there is a time saving here. You know, I can record it nice and quickly myself, I just follow the script. But if someone's already done it, why do I need to? So Tosca is filling out the form, filling out the dates, creating a sales order. And if I'm nice and quick, and if I grab a pen, $259. So we've just created a sales order, 20,059. That sales order now exists inside SAP, but Nearload is flashing in the background. Nearload was listening. Obviously, the flashing is just a Windows thing, you know, it's been updated in the background. But if we were to shrink this down, Webinar Web is the one that we created. This is the one that's just been transferred to us. It's called Create Sales Order. It came from Tosca. And if I expand on it, you can see the different steps. In the same way I logged in and I logged out and I put in those timers, we've got timers here already. And the timers come from Tosca because the person who designed the Tosca script kept it modular. They followed best practice. And if I make this a little bit shorter and we do a comparison, go to SAP, create a sales order, start the sales order process, exit. Exact same steps in here. So I've got modular timings around how long did it take to log in, for example. If I was to do a quick check again, I logged in with Nearload02. There is my login step, for example. That's where I set my username and password. But if I say, show me the responses from SAP, I know I'm sending data to SAP, but show me what came back. If I type in the 200 on obviously the 59, so 20,059, you can see here, that's the sales order number that SAP issued to me. And I've got it recorded, I've got it captured. If I wanted to, I could close this down and actually go and look for it if I wanted to. So this is my response from SAP, because obviously it's web traffic. And in here, if I do a search for the 2059, and I would just go across slightly, standard order has just been saved. So you can see that confirmation message that came from SAP. Now, obviously, this is my recording. I talked about getting it running. Now, if I take this test, and if I go back to here, I can run a framework against SAP, and it will say, you need to fix these 5, 10, 15, 74 values. So I'm going to let Nearload do that for me. Nearload is going to help me take that recorded script that I've just got delivered to me effectively, and I want to get it working and running. So I will turn off my little demo framework, but all of these other rules have basically scanned my test and they fixed everything they need to. And if I was to finish this and test my test script, which is on my other screen, do not play back within times. This is Nearload injecting that traffic into the system. So Nearload is pretending to be a browser. It's recorded the use case, it recorded what I did or what Tosca did, and it's going to inject that same conversation into SAP. Now we're playing back super quick, we're not pretending to be a real user pacing here. So we're just sending requests to SAP and getting responses back. But when it comes to performance testing, we would play this back at real user speed. My mum on the internet compared to me, fast users, slow users. So we've played that back. It says successful, but obviously, the proof is in the pudding. So let's do a quick check. If we do a quick flag, if I say 259, we don't see any blue ticks. And that was the old order number. We've now gone to 60 and 61 and 62. So if I change the 59 to a 60, you can see we now have a blue tick on the action section. If we follow the blue ticks again, the blue tick is in the sales order process. It's just before we leave, which is obviously when we saved. And if I get rid of that, this is the response from SAP that has the order number. I know it is because it's got a blue tick next to it. And if I was to do a search again and do a search for 260 this time, you can see here, oops, standard order, use my cursor keys, has just been saved. So I can now run this. I can have 300 users running this and create 300 SAP sales orders. So that seems to work absolutely fine. Now, in terms of kind of doing this, I've shown you web recording, but we also mentioned we can do SAP GUI recording as well. Now, the reason I want to show you this is when you're doing a migration from an on-prem ECC type setup to potentially S/4HANA, you might want to have a baseline. Let's test what it looks like now. Let's test it on the web and see if it's got any better. Exact same use cases, exact same situations, but is it now faster because we've upgraded, because we've gone SaaS-based or cloud-based? So I'm going to do an SAP GUI recording. Call it webinar GUI. Exact same setup though. And I'm going to move Nearload out of the background so we can see what it looks like and give it a Tosca. I see that same floating toolbar. But what am I timing now? how long does it take to connect to SAP? So we connect to SAP. I now need to log in. So again, in here, give it that, call it login, nearload 02, nearload 02, and we're in. Actually, we're not in because I made a typo. So NEOLD. Yep, that's fine, because also I got my password wrong the first time. And we're into SAP. And then once I'm in, I want to do a VA01. You can select it from the list, press enter, and you've gone in. Now, I'm not going to go through the entire use case, as I said. One sales order is the same as another sales order. But if I stop that, when the post-recording wizard pops up this time, there's no mention of correlation, because correlation is a web thing. When you're driving the GUI, we are doing exactly what you did. If you click in a letterbox, we will click in a letterbox. If you check a checkbox, we will check a checkbox. So I'm just going to say finish, and I'm going to show you what an SAP GUI recording looks like. So we'll close that one down, expand on this, exact same structure. I have timers around some actions, and what you can see here is this is where I was logging into SAP. Now I'm going to play back one I already created just to show you what it looks like. If I close this down, I will take this SAP GUI one, which as a matter of fact came from Tosca, but I can play that one back instead. So if I come back to my little playback window here, do I start checking? This time now, instead of Nearload pretending to be a browser, sending requests to the SAP server, we are driving the GUI, and the GUI is talking to the SAP server. But as I mentioned already, I can record a GUI script, I could record a web script, I could compare the performance of the two. And then this is me doing the VA01, but again, my hands are kind of here because this is one from earlier, and it's filling in the data. It's creating the sales order, it's filling in all of the fields and so on. And again, if I am nice and quick, and we look at the status bar at the bottom, '62 has just been created. Now, I did 59 and I did 60. Someone else is using SAP because they got 61. I've now got 62. But looking at my little recording here, my little playback, you can see here we've got a screenshot of the fact that you've got number 62. And if I look at the response, I also see that standard order has been created. So from an SAP point of view, it doesn't matter if it's web, doesn't matter if it's GUI, doesn't matter if you're migrating from on-prem to cloud, you can use it to do all of that testing. And then the last thing I was going to do, just to kind of wrap up the story, is show you a little bit about Real Browser. So as I mentioned already, I can record web, I can record SAP GUI, but when it comes to web, there is also this Real Browser capability. Real Browser is similar to the SAP GUI, as in we are going to record what you do and what you type. So if I do a Real Browser example, keep my naming convention going, so webinar Real Browser, same floating toolbar. We're going to start a client for you. Now we are waiting for the client to start up, so it takes a few seconds. But a web browser starts. Same story, you're going to get a bit bored of seeing the same stuff again, but let's go to the home page. We click on the link. We're going to log in, and we do nearload 02, which I cannot spell. Nearload 02. We log in. I'm not going to take any further. I'll just click on stop. But obviously, we're logging into SAP. So click on stop. Looking at what we've just recorded here, again, correlation is not needed because we're driving the browser takes care of that. If you're a real user driving the SAP GUI or the SAP web, the tools, the clients take care of that for you. So there's no correlation to do. We drive the browser takes care of all of those issues. And then if I just say next, we want think times and typing speeds. Do we want to record transaction times as well? How long it takes to do a request. You can do that with your browser. It won't affect navigation. It won't affect playback because we're still going to click the button, still going to click the edit box. But you may want to time how long the requests take. Extra evidence, if you like, when it comes to doing the analysis. So I'm just going to say finish at this point, and then we have a real browser script. Now, open the browser, an obvious thing, we open the browser. I said yes to capture the request, so we're going to time the request to style sheets to bitmaps to JPEGs. But then this is what I did. I went to the home page and I logged in. And obviously, if I was to expand on login, that's where I clicked on the user field. That's when I typed in my password. Now, the one thing you noticed here is that when it comes to the field, we recognize it in multiple ways. And the reason behind that purely is the fact of building robustness, resilience. Because if the next deployment of SAP, they've changed it from, username to user ID, then tools might be, well, I can't find that field, what do I do? Nearload takes care of that. We're recognizing that control in multiple ways. So if it does change, we have a plan B and a plan C and a plan D to find the object. Now, again, I'm not going to play back this one. Here is one we prepared earlier. But you will see again nearload drive in the front end. Now, I can take all of these different types of tests. At the moment, we have 4 different tests at the moment. I can take those and I can turn it into a performance test. So I've got about 3 minutes left. So I want to do some time for questions again. But once this test kicks off, I will show you how to build a performance test, and then we'll look at some results. So spinning up our little virtual person. Our little virtual person is running on a load generator. That little virtual person has now just started the browser, and they are going to click the buttons, type in the screens, and so on. So we'll let it finish. But we're doing a VA01. And it looks like the demo effect is going to get me. There we go. So I dried run this like about an hour ago, all working perfectly, but obviously the demo effect kicks in when you're live and people are watching. But I'll figure it out afterwards. But it's going to drive the front end and create a sales order. Now, what we now need to do is we've got 3 different test cases or 4 different test cases that all work. We can take those test cases and we can turn it into what we call a population. A population is just your users. Whoever they are, whatever they do, however they do it. People creating sales orders, amending sales orders, running invoices, generating documents, different users doing different types of behavior on an SAP system. But the whole idea really is I can model that. GUI, web, APIs, batch jobs, ETLs, I can turn all of that into a population. I can decide what I want to observe when the test is running, and then I can play it back. Now, obviously, from the observability point of view, is keeping an eye on the back end while 500 users are kind of kicking down the front door. How is the back end coping with all of these users all making all of these requests? But we can play that back. We can play it back on my local machine because I've got everything I need here. But when it comes to playback, I can also add Faz's machine if I wanted to. I could have machines from the cloud because it's your system. If you've got users sat in Singapore, you might want to inject traffic from Singapore. And our cloud gives you the ability to do that. So you design your performance test and you click on the play button. Now, I don't have time in this webinar to run a 2-hour load test. So I do have one I prepared earlier. You kick off that load test, and you'll have results here in your Nearload GUI. You'll have any alerts in terms of memory, CPU consumption, any warnings. If there's errors, you see errors, and you also have dashboarding capabilities. So I could say all transactions average duration, and I could plot on a graph, and I could make the graph nice and big, change the colors, all of that kind of stuff. But when I ran this test, I also published my results to Nearload Web, because unless you live in my house and you're sat next to me in my little office, you're not going to see what's happening. So by pushing my results to Nearload Web, you can see there's my little webinar prep from earlier. If I go into it, here's my graphs. So there's a 5-user load test, and different users doing different types of activities, but I've got information here. I've got all of the underlying evidence, the values, the numbers. Any events, like we mentioned earlier, the CPU on the web balance, the web balance is running a little hot. Again, you can see that kind of stuff being flagged here. And you can also define SLAs. I probably should have mentioned this earlier, but you can define what good looks like. If you've said SAP in the web must respond within 3 seconds, you can measure that if you wanted to. And then you've got the dashboards that we saw as well. So me as an engineer, I'll report on my laptop. Everyone else, they can collaborate on the web if they want to. So I've got a dashboard here, lots of information, lots of graphs. You could also create your own dashboards. So let's create a brand new one, exactly like we just did in the GUI. I want all transactions, average duration, plot on a graph, the same graph, because it's the same information. You can report whatever you want. And obviously this is the overall test for everyone doing everything. But what if you wanted to break it down? I want to go into this one here, for example, and I want to see how long it takes to create a sales order in the SAP GUI. And again, you can drop that on there if you wanted to. So I've come to the end of my time. Obviously, I've done quite a bit of talking. The perfect time for questions, and obviously for Faz to take over and do the wrap up.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Neil. There doesn't seem to be any questions. So we're coming near to the end of the webinar, so I think we'll probably wrap up. So I'd just like to say to the audience, I hope you've enjoyed our webinar today. And if anyone is interested, then we'd welcome the opportunity of setting up any one-to-one sessions to discuss how Nearload can add value on your S/4HANA migration. So thank you very much for attending, and goodbye.
Perfect.